that is really the challenge before our police services. Do you think they don't have the ability to behave like ISI? Just test them out. But they cannot, because as institutions, in fact, the point made by Uday about integrity is really powerful. We have to work towards an increase, and therefore the demands on us are actually more difficult. Our foreign secretary cannot behave like Salman Bashir. And so we get angry at her, but there is no point. Her limitations are there. Because we still believe that there are civilized norms of behavior which we cannot abandon. But let me now take a little time, if you will permit me, to take a difficult subject. The word jihad. There is so much understanding and misunderstanding about the Quran that I really do want to take, particularly since Shamal has said so, very evocatively and eloquently mentioned it. I am not a pretend Muslim. I really believe in my faith. And because I believe in my faith, I read the Quran, which I do constantly. I read it in translation. And for me, English is no less important than Arabic. Although, yes, Arabic is the language in which the Quran was sent, and therefore it is mellifluous, it is beautiful, it is holy. Quran itself is a miracle. It is the living miracle, if you know how it was transmitted. But within the Quran it says that I have sent prophets in every language. I wrote a column once. Somebody said that if Indian Muslims are ready to accept Krishna as a prophet, all our problems will be solved. I said, why should he not potentially be a prophet? The only thing that we have is that we believe and strongly believe out of commitment that there cannot be a prophet after Muhammad, peace be upon him. But anyone before him, sure. Allah was not born with Islam. The Prophet's father was Abdullah. When recently in Malaysia they had a controversy, they're foolish. Allah begins in the Quran with creation. He is the creator of Adam and Eve. Islam is only 1400 years old. He's God. He's God of everyone. The most important, I'm so happy that I recall this. When Aurangzeb imposed jizya, Shivaji wrote to him one of the most beautiful letters that I have had the privilege to read. I'm not saying this because you're obliged to praise Shivaji here. I say this out of conviction because I've read the letters. And he says that have you forgotten that your Allah, that is called Rabbul Alameen, the Rabb of all the world, not Rabbul Muslimeen. And therefore the Hindus of this nation are equally deserving of your protection and your generosity. They are citizens of your country, they are equals. I say over and over again that the idea of India, if you want an Islamic context to it, is really the idea of the Medina state formed by the Prophet. Because when he enters Medina, the Muslims are the smallest element of the population. He was not made the Imam of Medina because the Muslims were the most powerful or the Muslims were largest in number. He was made because of his own, his stature. And he had to live with Jews, with Christians, with idol-worshipping Arabs. With each one of them, he created a pact. In the second surah of the Quran, go and read it. There is a reference that there was a dispute in Medina between Christians and Jews about some point of doctrinal dispute. And somebody said that, why don't you interpose? He says, no. Remember one thing, that both Christians and Jews worship the same God. And therefore you have no right to hurt or interfere with either a church or a synagogue. There is no instance of a church or a synagogue being destroyed under his. And what did he teach? He taught. I'm not saying anything original. In the 30s and 40s, The ulama, particularly the Jamia Ulama Hind, Maulana Madani used to argue this frequently in the ideological debates, that the secular India is formed from that model. I mean, not directly, but it is equivalent to that model. Those of you who think Quran that has no place in secularism, lakum dinakum wa iliya din. I have had no definition of secularism which is more relevant. Your faith for you, my faith for me, that is it. We are not compelled to intermarry, we are not compelled to interfere, we are merely compelled to have respect for each other. And remember, there are no Dantes in India. Indians, Hindus and Muslims have lived for as long with each other as Christians and Muslims. You cannot find Dante. Those who have read the Divine Comedy will know what I mean. There is no instance of any Hindu poet, not to my knowledge, of desecrating the Prophet of Islam. And there is no instance of any Muslim poet desecrating the gods of Hindus. Even Iqbal, the founder, the poet of Pakistan, declared Lord Ram to be Imam-e-Hind. He knew he was part of Hind when he wrote it. See, Hind ke Imam. Because it is respect for the other's right to believe in what you believe. It is not mine, given to me, to do anything else. The problem with Pakistan and the roots lie in an extension of a theory. As long as the independence movement was built around a struggle for the security of Muslims, it had some rationale, because nobody knew what a democracy would mean. Don't ever forget that the people who belong to a democratic movement, there was no template for democracy. The vote for women in Britain was only given in 1829. Democracy was a variable reality and full of, rotten boroughs. William Pitt the Elder, I was just reading a biography the other day. William Pitt the Elder, one of the greatest of the prime ministers, just slightly great than William Pitt the Younger, he was declared elected. Guess how many voters he had? 5. So democracy was a variable reality, as I said. We didn't know. So yes, there was a case that could be made for constitutional guarantees. As long as that fight was that level of security and politics, it was political. But in the 1930s, that argument was switched. It was switched to Islam is in danger. Not Muslims are in danger. The moment the argument was switched to Islam is in danger, the dynamic of the argument changed. And therefore, Pakistan became a haven not just for Muslims, it became a haven for Islam. And to cut a long story short, for the really long story, you'll have to read 300 pages of my next book. To cut a long story short, eventually after 1947, the question was raised by Maulana Maududi to Jinnah. To be fair to Jinnah, after having used the dialectic of communalism, when it got Pakistan, he and Gandhi were on similar tracks. Gandhi wanted a secular nation with a Hindu majority. He had advocated a secular nation with a Muslim majority, except that Gandhi's ideology was inclusive, his ideology was exclusive. And that is where the fundamental flaw lay. And therefore, after partition, the question was raised, it had to be raised, that if Pakistan was created for the defense of Islam, who is going to protect Islam? Army officers who need some